Every day it's a super struggle. Like, I don't even know how to handle it sometimes. Like, I put on a great face, a good face, but then deep down I'm like, hey, you're gonna break, you're struggling. Like, how are you gonna manage it? How are you gonna fix it?
I knew from early adolescence that something was wrong. I would self-harm and have thoughts of suicide, and I couldn't really cope the way my friends did. I was in and out of the hospital over a dozen times with no diagnosis and no real help.
I was diagnosed with high-functioning Asperger's as well as ADHD when I was really young, and it's kind of been a long ride of, a lot of people misunderstanding me, having behavioral issues as a kid, my parents doing their best, but I was their first kid, so they didn't really know exactly what they were dealing with. And just a lot of impulsivity, a lot of issues in the classroom, a lot of issues in social life and stuff like that.
I lost my husband to suicide. His death knocked me on my knees, and I became completely obsessed with his death, and we had a very codependent relationship, so I felt completely lost without him. So now I struggle with post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, and extreme guilt.
Nine years ago, our son Peter died by suicide, and so obviously when that happened, it's just whatever, your head's spinning, you don't know what's going on. The first little while it was pretty crazy, pretty chaotic, and so you just since then, we're still dealing with it.
I was a teenager and learning to cope on my own and my own struggles. And then much, much later, it wasn't until in my 30s that I had a diagnosis.
For me, I was diagnosed, after being misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, also with cannabis use disorder. And so prior to that, my experience with mental health and addictions was very much symptoms of auditory hallucinations, delusions. I was using cannabis to the point where it was unhealthy.
I've been struggling with mental health probably since I was about 13 years old. I didn't address it till probably when I was just about in my 50s. It's just been kind of a roller coaster. I didn't want to address it, I don't think, so instead of dealing with my issues, I decided to dive into addiction.
So eventually my addiction, it did lead me to trouble with the law. I was sentenced to 3 years in prison due to my bad choices and addiction, and that's basically when I began to make the change in my life, the necessary changes. And honestly, for me, and what I preach to everybody, is it all begins with reaching out for help.
So the reason I got so passionate about peer support is because of my own lived experience with mental illness and living with mental illness. Labels are getting thrown at you that you've never heard before, and you're feeling things you've never felt before, and you're experiencing things that are new, and it's an incredibly overwhelming time. In our relationships with peers, we get to experience those transitions and those growth moments with someone who's starting sometimes what feels like the bottom and growing into finding their supports to really create their path of recovery. We focus on the emotional, social, and practical side of things. So when you're creating a circle of care for someone and pulling the right members onto their team, the peer supporter can play those roles alongside of any clinical treatments or people that they have on their team.
I think it's one of the most important services that can be included in mental health and addiction. I think that, it's so valuable to have somebody on your team that has lived experience, that knows what you've been through. May not be the exact experience, but that comfort that somebody else may have experienced something that you really feel shameful about and really have a hard time accepting that was part of your history. Things like having to choose between food and rent, or being taken to the hospital without your will, against your will, being put in jail because you're ill. All those experiences, if someone knows that someone else has been through it and come through it and survived, that gives them so much more hope and takes away a little bit of the shame. I think those are the things that peer supporters give to clients that practitioners can't always give. And I think that's a really important thing, because we need clinicians, we need that professional expertise, absolutely. We need our doctors, we need medication, we need that whole array of clinical services. But in order to have that sit well, in order for that to really integrate with your life and who you are, it is so helpful to have someone beside you that understands what that can be like.
We're not alone in all of this, and that's one thing that I really, once you start talking and exploring what's out there, you realize that you're not alone in all of this, and people are there to help.
You kind of gravitate towards them because they're not wearing a white coat, and it seems like you're making a new friend, or you're just communicating in a healthy way in that relationship. So I do think peer support is instrumental.
Definitely try to seek out for a peer support. It's someone that's had lived experience, someone that will hold that space for you and will not judge you. They know that path that you're walking down, and that you don't have to do it by yourself.
I think it's that openness, that willingness to search out information and answers, as opposed to blaming yourself or feeling overwhelmed and kind of shutting yourself off, right? Because you don't know what's available until you start looking, and you realize that oh my gosh, there's a ton of different resources that are available that can help you kind of find your way through this situation.
Talking about it has been one of the best things, and having somebody who's non-judgmental to be there with you and just talking has been such great recovery therapy for me. So I think just get rid of the fear and start.
There's a big stigma around reaching out for help, where people think that there must be something wrong with them, or there's going to be a lot of judgment from the people close to them if they do reach out for help. And that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to break the stigma of people reaching out for help and show that it's okay to reach out for help, because specifically with addiction and mental health, nobody can beat addiction on their own without some sort of support team. And I strongly, strongly believe that after I got arrested, if I didn't reach out for help to the CMHA, I have no idea where I'd be right now.
Walking with them is just precious. It's a precious moment. I can't explain it any more than it is awesome. It is something that I take away from every time I hear a good thing, a positive thing. And even if they slide backwards, I'm still there to help them go forward again.
Your story could help another person, because they could have been either the same situation or something similar. Don't give up on it, because there's someone for everybody out there. So just keep going.
I think one of the important things to note is that often a lot of us don't want to reach out for help because we're already feeling a lot of what can be self-stigma or shame around what we're experiencing and going through, and self-judgment. And the really beautiful part of peer support is that when you are deciding to reach out and take that step, which is the hardest step, but you're reaching out to someone who can relate to those feelings directly and empathize with them. And that is pretty rare to find. And if that's your first point of contact, it's a pretty amazing connection that can come from that, knowing that you're not alone in what you're feeling. And you're talking to someone who's been there, and is that resemblance of hope for recovery.